Hello Pokemon trainers, welcome back to another Pokemon TCG Pocket video here on iStarly TV. I know it's been a while, I know that I've been super infrequent with my uploads. I think it's been about 2 weeks since my last upload, and I know I always say this, but I have been very busy lately. I kind of started a new job, or rather my main job, I kind of like got promoted in a way basically, so I have a lot of work, more so than before. I've also had a lot of other kind of personal issues and personal, family things going on lately. So just been super busy and just a lot to kind of take into account. And I will say, I'm talking about the new set because they have finally released an official trailer for the new set. It's called Secluded Springs. So again, I apologize for the inconsistency with everything. I hope that I can... I should have actual time to post more, and I always say that, but, we'll kind of see if I can pick back up, especially with making content. I believe the new set drops 1 week from the recording of this video, so it's pretty soon. They always release the trailers a week before. And yeah, let's get to some of the new cards. Now, I plan on just kind of talking about a few of them. I mean, there's a lot of new cards from the trailer. Some of them are just, not great, but let's talk about some of the exciting ones. First of all, the one I want to start by talking about is Mantyke. Mantyke is basically the water version of Pichu and Magby. So we have the third, I was kind of expecting this and hoping that we would get another baby Pokemon that could put water energy. So 30 HP, no weakness, no retreat cost, it's a water type, and it has Splashy Toss, which costs 0 energy. Take a water energy from your energy zone and attach it to one of your benched Pokemon. Of course, this makes sense that, again, we got Pichu, we got Magby in the previous set, and this is effectively the water version of that. I wonder if over time they would eventually make a version of these for every single type. Maybe that's a little too much to ask for. But I guess I'm trying to think, are there any dark type baby Pokemon? I'm not sure there are. But I think for all of the other types, there's at least one baby Pokemon that they could use. But I don't know, maybe that's too much to ask for. Maybe that's too crazy. But as we've seen with the baby Pokemon, I know I haven't really posted that much, but just kind of as the meta has developed over the course of Wisdom of Sea and Sky, baby Pokemon are actually good. And they're as risky as they look. It's like if you start with them, they're really, really good. Like if you have a baby in your active spot right turn 1, and you're able to put an extra energy on one of your strong attackers like Ho-Oh, Darkrai, Silvally. I mean, there's so many examples. You're just off to like an amazing start in that case. But of course, if you draw baby Pokemon later, or if you like lead with your main attacker like Ho-Oh or Darkrai or whatever, then the baby Pokemon are significantly worse. So there's a high risk, high reward with playing these baby Pokemon, but Mantyke will likely be pretty much the same deal. Though it's a water type, and water of course has some really strong and really interesting attackers. Maybe this will breathe life back into some of the Pokemon like Palkia EX, or just other strong water types like Gyarados is another big one. This is basically a better version of Manaphy, right? I know Manaphy can put 2 energy on 2 different Pokemon, or 1 energy on each of 2 different Pokemon, but this costs 0 energy, so it just really, doesn't cost anything to start. So I think this is ultimately better. And yeah, I mean, water has good support with like Misty and Irida, so who knows, maybe water type decks will be really, really good again. And then I think the other cards that I wanted to talk about are the 3 new EX Pokemon. It's likely we will get like about 5 EXs. I think usually with the smaller sets, they give us about 5 EX Pokemon total. So they've revealed 3 of them, which are the legendary beasts. Pretty unsurprisingly, I think a lot of people, myself included, were expecting us to get EX versions of these, because a big reason was because the versions of them that we got in Wisdom of Sea and Sky were pretty bad. And also these are Pokemon that just make a lot of sense to be EXs because they're like legendary and they're really cool, they're fan favorites. So let's take a look at these. Raikou EX, Entei EX, and Suicune EX. Of course, as you would guess, they are an electric type, a fire type, and a water type respectively. They are all basic Pokemon. They all have 2 retreat cost, and they all have the ability Legendary Pulse, which says at the end of your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, draw a card. That is really strong. And then finally, one last similarity that they all have is they each have an attack that requires just 2 energy of their respective type. And now that we have basically a baby Pokemon for each of these 3 types that can put an energy of their respective type on them, again, Pichu, Magby, and now Mantyke, respectively, these are a good amount better. You know, we've seen like Silvally has still been so good mainly because of those baby Pokemon, like the ability to like usually, or it used to be the case where with Silvally, you know, it requires 2 energy to attack first. And if you were going first, you just feel like you're significantly behind because you're not putting the energy on Silvally. But the baby Pokemon kind of fixed that. And this is similar where these EXs, they require 2 energy to attack. So if you're going first, you could start with a baby Pokemon in the active spot and then this one on the bench, this EX, whichever one you're playing, of course. And then you can, you know, attack with your baby Pokemon, put the energy on your EX, and then the very next turn you get to put the second energy on the EX, retreat the baby, and attack, which is very strong. I think that's really strong. 60 damage is actually really good because it knocks out EVs. So if you're up against like an EV deck, it can knock them out. Basically knocks out like a lot of basic Pokemon that we see, a lot of non-EX basic Pokemon, of course. And I mean, their 3 attacks are different, so let's kind of talk about them. But I just simply think like if you start the way that I said, where you have like, let's say for example, Entei, you have Magby in the active spot on the first turn, you have Entei on the bench, you attack with Magby, put an energy on Entei, second turn you put the second energy on Entei, you retreat Magby, you attack for 60, possibly knock something out, which is very good, and then of course you at the end of your turn you draw a card. So that's just really strong. I think that's extremely strong. But let's talk about, because they're all pretty different with their attacks. Raikou has Voltaic Bolt, 60 damage for 2 energy. This attack also does 10 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. I think that's solid. People were saying this is pretty bad. As we all know, myself included, I think Pokemon TCG Pocket players, again, myself included, are bad at evaluating cards. There have been so many examples of when a new card is revealed and a lot of people, myself included, say it's awful. It turns out to be really good. An example is Giratina EX. I honestly thought it was bad at first. It's now been just one of the mainstay strongest Pokemon in the game. A lot of people, myself included, thought Ho-Oh and Espeon EX were bad. They're both really good, it turns out. So again, who knows how good these will end up being, but Voltaic Bolt, again, 60 damage. That perfect scenario where you start with a baby Pokemon and you attack with Raikou on your second turn. 60 damage, once again, is pretty solid that early in the game, and also hitting one of their bench Pokemon for 10, of course, lets this combo really nicely with Cyrus so that later on you can kind of, you know, bring that into play. Of course, with Raikou specifically, you also have access to Zeraora, so you just, and then like maybe a energy switch, so you just have so many different ways of like manipulating energy and moving energy around, which I think is really powerful. So I do think the fact that Raikou is an electric type, I think they kind of balanced it by giving it 10 less HP than the other two. I think this Pokemon's good. I think it's good. I'm not sure it'll be the best Pokemon in the game. I'm not sure it'll be like great, but electric decks have seen a little bit of a resurgence kind of recently. Like electric is actually a really good typing right now, and one of the awesome things about the baby Pokemon is they've actually brought back Pokemon that were basically dead. They've brought back Pokemon from the dead, like for example, Pikachu EX from Genetic Apex and like Arceus EX. These are Pokemon that like stopped seeing play because everything else just got stronger than them. But thanks to the baby Pokemon, they're actually good now. They're actually playable. Like Pikachu EX from Genetic Apex has not been good for a long time, and it's actually decent now, thanks to Pichu mainly, and thanks to like Energy Switch and stuff like that. So yeah, don't sleep on electric type Pokemon. I know that with that in mind, there's a wealth of good electric types. Pikachu EX can do 90 damage for 2 energy, whereas Raikou only does 60, right? Technically 70 total. So in that example, obviously you would probably prefer Pikachu EX, but Raikou has his share of benefits, and of course the fact that you can draw extra cards with this is very strong. Then we've got Entei with Blazing Beat down, 60 damage for 2 energy. However, if it has 2 extra fire energy on it, it does 60 more damage. So that perfect scenario I talked about, you start with Magby, Entei's on the bench, and then you set it up, and then you attack with it on your second turn for 60 damage. It's really good. And then just like incidentally over the course of the game, like, you attack for 60, which is pretty good that early in the game. Then the next turn you put another energy on it, attack for 60 more, which if you did not knock something out before, you're getting closer to knocking something out, like an EX. And then the following turn, you just put another energy on it, and you're just doing 120 now. So that's not that far away from, or that's not hard to achieve, basically. And similarly, of course, it does draw a card. I think this is good. Like, we don't have too many basic fire EXs. I mean, Ho-Oh, of course, that's a big one. With Ho-Oh, of course, Ho-Oh requires 3 energy to do 80 damage, but yeah, I think once again, there's something here. I think the fact that they draw cards, it's just so good. Like, that's something you should not sleep on. Even if you look at these and they're technically weaker than another Pokemon, the fact that they can draw extra cards definitely has some value. It's kind of sad, but also very understandable that excuse me. It's kind of sad, but very understandable that they require 2 of their respective energy, rather than like 1 energy and then a colorless, for example, like, because that would be cool, because you could kind of play them in the same deck together, but also that would be really strong. So I guess it makes sense that they're kind of balanced that way. Finally, we've got Suicune EX here. Same thing, Legendary Pulse. Same thing, requires 2 water energy, but it has Crystal Waltz 20 times. Now this is the most interesting attack here. This attack does 20 damage for each bench Pokemon. That includes yours and your opponent's. So at the baseline, I would say this is always going to be doing about 60. So that makes sense. Like, that puts it on par with the other two, because you can kind of have control of how you build your deck. And so you can make it more likely that you're going to have a full bench, which lets this do 60 damage at least. And then from there, if your opponent even has 1 other Pokemon on their bench, this is doing 80 for 2 energy. And if they have 2 Pokemon on their bench, this is doing 100. The maximum damage this can do is 120, which doesn't sound insane, but there's some games where you just incidentally, like on turn 2, you and your opponent both have a full bench. And especially with the Eevee decks, they often have very full benches as well. Not only that, but again, Pikachu EX is seeing more play. That's a Pokemon that wants a full bench. Arceus is seeing play, which is another Pokemon that wants a full bench. It's absolutely feasible that this is doing 120 damage on turn 2. I think this is really, really powerful. Of course, it does require a few things to go right, but like I said, you're probably going to build your deck in a way where you always have a full bench, and then your opponent having extra Pokemon on their bench is just a bonus. So again, 2 energy for 60 damage is definitely worse than Pikachu EX, but if your opponent just happens to have 1 Pokemon or 2 Pokemon, like it just scales so well. And again, you're also just drawing an extra card. This is also a water type basic, which means you can play Misty, you can play Irida. I guess you could play Misty as like a safety valve, where it's just like between Mantyke and Misty, you're just more likely to get a lot of energy on this Pokemon early. Of course, you probably want to play other Pokemon as well. Probably want to play some not basics necessarily, but some non-EXs as well that can do damage because of Oricorio. Although, of course, Oricorio is super effective against Suicune, so maybe you're just going to take your loss against Oricorio either way, so maybe you don't want to worry too much about that. But either way, I'm really excited for all 3 of these. I'll be honest, when I first saw them, I didn't really think very highly of them, but the funny thing is, kind of talking through it right now has actually made me a lot more excited. So let me know what you think about the Legendary Beast EXs. I think they're all great. And finally, let's talk about a few more cards very, very quickly, because I don't have too much time. So we have Latios and Latias. So Latias is 90 HP, 1 energy, crossing flights. It does 20 damage, but it does 20 more damage if you have Latios on your bench. Then there's Latios, 110 HP, 2 retreat cost. Ability Fantastical Floating. If you have Latios in play, this Pokemon has no retreat cost. And then Luster Purge, 120 damage for 3 energy. Discard all energy from this Pokemon. Okay, so I actually like these. First of all, I really like Latias, because Latias can do 40 damage for just 1 energy. which is pretty good. Like we've seen, I mean, there used to be a point where Farfetch'd was really good. I know we're far away from that time, you know, from it being relevant, but more recently we have Kartana, which is another similar example, which is basically a grass version of Farfetch. Kartana has seen a lot of play in Buzzwole decks, and the 40 damage is very relevant. Latias has 90 HP. That's a solid chunk of HP. That's basically impossible to one-shot early in the game. And, I mean, there are a lot of Dark-type decks these days. You know, Darkrai is as good as ever. Guzzlord decks are really good. Like, there's a lot of, like, really solid Dark decks. But I think this is solid. I actually think Latias is solid. Of course, it does require you to also have Latios in play, which means you're probably going to be playing 2 copies of each of these. Latios, 3 energy for 120 is pretty good. However, of course, you're discarding all energy from this Pokemon. We do have some energy manipulation for Psychic types with like, but it's not that good, honestly. Like there's like Gardevoir, which has not seen play for a while. There's also like Lunala EX, which is also just like kind of a lot of hoops to jump through. So I don't know. Latias I do like a lot, but I'm not really sure about Latios. My thought process is maybe you play Latios more as like a tank, like as a stall, which is kind of weird. Like that's kind of bad. Like those types of things haven't been good for a while. There used to be a point where people would play Kangaskhan simply because it could sit in the active spot and just absorb damage for a couple turns and do a little bit of damage itself and then switch out later on for something else. Those types of things are not quite that good anymore, honestly, so I'm not really sure about Latios. Unfortunately, I just wish Latios was better. I wish it required less energy to attack and then just do less damage, obviously. But I do like Latias a lot, so I will see what else is in the set. That might encourage, you know, or that might inform which of these are good or if they're playable at all, which in all honesty, they're probably not. But I'm definitely down to try them out because I've always loved Latios and Latias. They're awesome. Final card I want to talk about here is a really interesting one. A lot of people have kind of like focused on this as well. There's a few other ones that are exciting in this set, but I'm just going to go ahead and just end it after this one. Miltank. 110 HP, that's pretty solid. And it has for 1 energy, Rolling Frenzy. It does 10 damage, but it says until this Pokemon leaves the active spot, this Pokemon's Rolling Frenzy attack does plus 30 damage. This effect stacks. So this is really, I see it's really divisive. It's really funny. I'm on the Pokemon Zone website, which I'll go ahead and put a link to in the description. The first comment says Sweets Relay if it was bad. So they're saying this is worse than Sweets Relay. And then the next comment says this can be really good. So, you know, people are saying, basically people are torn on this card. I like it. I think it looks like a lot of fun to try. It is, of course, very reminiscent for those of you like me who grew up with the like Gold and Silver Pokemon games, who are traumatized by Whitney's Miltank. You know, this kind of is giving Whitney's Miltank vibes. But yeah, this could be a lot of fun to play. Obviously, you just play a bunch of healing. You play some like Giant Capes. You play some maybe Pokemon Center Ladies. Maybe you play Water Energy, so you can play Irida. So you just try to do massive chunks of damage with this and just heal it over time. That could be a lot of fun, like a Miltank 18 trainer deck. I'm going to try that. I don't think it's going to be good, but I definitely want to try it because you do 10 damage, and then the next turn you do 40. Then you do 70, then you do 100, then, you know, if you're able to just keep attacking, like, you're just really, really racking up the damage to the point where, you know, if your opponent's taking too long to set up, this seems like it could be, like, pretty good against, like, stall kind of decks, because they're just not doing anything for a long time, so you're just able to just, like, again, just plow through them over and over. That sounds weird, but I don't know. This is a fun card. It looks really interesting, and I'm excited to try it out. Notably, this is a promo. It does have the little Chansey icon showing that this is a promo card, so I don't know if this is just a promo version with different artwork of the Miltank that's in the set, or if there is another Miltank card in the set and this is just the promo, like this is another version of Miltank, which they sometimes do, or if there is no Miltank in the set and this is the promo. So basically, there's a chance we have to wait for this to be released, like when they do their little promo event, whenever that is. But it also could be in the main set. But either way, really exciting stuff. Let me know in the comments what you think. I know this ended up being a longer video, but hey, it's been a while, so maybe this makes up for that. I'm really excited for the Legendary Beasts. I think they're great. I'm super excited for Mantyke, and I'm personally excited for Latios and Latias, but unfortunately I'm not sure they'll be very good. But anyway, let me know what you think. I'm interested in hearing. Hope you have a great one, and I'll see you next time.